that Laurel Canyon was actually the true birthplace, really, of the whole 60s counterculture, the music scene, the whole hippie flower child thing. So obviously most people, well, there's two major misconceptions that people have about hippie flower child, the whole countercultural movement in the 60s, which was the biggest countercultural movement in U.S. history. And the two misconceptions are, number one, that the hippies and the anti-war movement were one and the same, that they were synonymous, and that's clearly not true. The anti-war movement was already well underway before the hippies appeared on the scene, and many of the original anti-war activists did not look on the hippies too kindly at all. In fact, I have quotes from people saying, "Where did these people come from? What is this, an intelligence operation?" So that's the first misconception. The second one is that it really kind of all started in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco, which is also not true. It actually started right here in L.A., right in Laurel Canyon, which sits right above the Sunset Strip, where all the clubs are that all these bands originally got their start in. Like late 1964, early 1965, right here in the Laurel Canyon neighborhood of Los Angeles, which is a portion of the Hollywood Hills, which is now anyway, is a very, very exclusive, very, very wealthy neighborhood, and it's also a very geographically and socially isolated neighborhood. It's sort of a little island into itself up there. There's really only one way in and out on Laurel Canyon Boulevard to get up into there, and it's just very rustic, heavily wooded, very, very serene, yet vaguely ominous when you know its history.
Right.
Section of L.A. where this whole music and countercultural scene was born here, right here in my backyard, and I had no idea.
Right, and of course,
I had no idea who all these people really were that were sort of in the forefront of getting the ball rolling on all this stuff.
Right. Well, and it was also at the time when the Gulf of Tonkin lie got us, seriously involved in Vietnam.
Exactly. Well, it happened, simultaneous with that. In August, first week of August 1964, as when the infamous Gulf of Tonkin incident took place, in which two U.S. warships that were part of a fleet under the command of Navy Admiral George Stephen Morrison, whose major distinction at that time was that he was the youngest man to attain the rank of Navy Admiral, but he also had another claim to fame, which wasn't talked about, but which we'll get to in a second here. But anyway, that took place in the first week of August. These ships were supposedly attacked. That led directly to the passing, within a couple of days, literally within like 48 hours, the Congress had passed the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, which was obviously pre-drafted, just as the Patriot Act was, and all this other stuff we've seen more recently, just waiting for a pretext, and so this incident took place, which is all but officially now been acknowledged didn't actually take place. We never were attacked at all. But that was the trigger that allowed what had been being waged as a covert war to be vastly escalated and led directly to the introduction of uniformed ground troops and a massive bombing campaign that went on for years and years and years, and hundreds of thousands of kids got shipped off there. 50-some thousand never came back. Tens of thousands of other ones came back in pieces, and it all stemmed from the Tonkin Gulf incident in August of 1964.
Right, and you make it very clear it wasn't a false flag attack. It was just an out-and-out lie.
It wasn't a false flag attack, and it wasn't a deliberately provoked attack, although I think that may have been the goal. These ships were actually doing intelligence reconnaissance work, illegal activities. They were probably trying to provoke an attack and failed to do so they just made one up. Basically they just completely made it up. Said that we were attacked, and we never were. We didn't lose any men. We didn't lose any ships. The whole thing was just a non-event. It never happened. But that was the main trigger that allowed what had been a low-level covert war to escalate into the massive, conflict in Vietnam that ultimately spread into Laos and Cambodia, and. So, but anyway, at the very time that this happened, the Tonkin Gulf, and then the introduction of ground troops and bombing, which were underway by March of 1965. It didn't take long. I mean, by the end of 1965, we already had 200,000 troops over there, more than we have now in Iraq after, however many years that's been. So, I mean, it was a massive escalation that led directly from the Tonkin Gulf incident.
So what part did Admiral George Morrison have to play in the Gulf of Tonkin?